Hello, school family. It is nice to see everybody, and it was wonderful to see everybody on Mr. John's Zoom call yesterday. So happy Tuesday, and happy start to our week. I hope everyone is doing well, and we are going to continue today with some more of The Hobbit. Thank you, Mr. Pigeon, for keeping track of our place. We're going to be going back to Chapter 2, Roast Mutton, which we did not finish last time. And to recap, our hero, Mr. Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit, is on his adventure with 13 dwarves to get their treasure back from an evil dragon. Now, when we last left, Gandalf the Wizard had disappeared and no one knew where he went to. There was a storm going on and and one of the ponies had run away into the river. Everyone is very miserable and very hungry right now, but the dwarves and Mr. Bilbo see a firelight in the distance, and they're all creeping towards it to see if it's going to be a friend or if it's going to be an enemy. So we're going to pick up right where they left off. Suddenly, the red light shone out very bright through the tree trunks not far ahead. "Now it's the burglar's turn," said the dwarves, meaning Bilbo. "You must go on and find out all about that light, and what it is for, and if it is perfectly safe and canny." And Thorin said to the hobbit, "Now scuttle off, and come back quick, if all is well. If not, come back if you can. If you can't, hoot twice like a barn owl and once like a screech owl, and we'll do what we can." Off Bilbo had to go, before he could explain that he could not hoot even once like any kind of owl, more than fly like a bat. But at any rate, hobbits can move quietly in the woods, absolutely quietly. They take a pride in it, and Bilbo had sniffed more than once at what he called all this dwarvish racket. As they went along, though don't suppose you or I would have noticed anything at all on a windy night, not if the whole cavalcade had passed 2 feet off. As for Bilbo walking primly towards the red light, I don't suppose even a weasel would have stirred a whisker at it. So, naturally, he got right up to the fire, for fire it was, without disturbing anyone. And this is what he saw. 3 very large persons sitting around a very large fire of beech logs. They were toasting mutton. And mutton is sheep meat, in case you didn't know. They were toasting mutton on long spits of wood and licking the gravy off their fingers. There was a fine toothsome smell. Also, there was a barrel of good drink at hand, and they were drinking out of jugs. But they were trolls. Obviously trolls. Even Bilbo, in spite of his sheltered life, could see that. From the great heavy faces on them, and their size, and the shape of their legs, not to mention their language, which was not drawing-room fashion at all. "Mutton yesterday, mutton today, and blimey if it don't look like mutton again tomorrow," said one of the trolls. "Never a blinking bit of man-flesh have we had for long enough," said a second. "What the heck William was a-thinking of to bring us into these parts at all, beats me. And the drink running short, what's more," he said, jogging the elbow of William, who was taking a pull at his jug. William choked. "Shut your mouth," he said as soon as he could. "You can't expect folk to stop here forever just to be et by you and Bert. You've et a village and a half between you since we came down from the mountains. How much more do you want? And time's been up our way when you'd have said thank you, Bill, for a nice bit of fat valley mutton like this." He took a big bite off a sheep's leg he was roasting and wiped his lips on his sleeve. Yes, I'm afraid trolls do behave like that, even those with only one head each. After hearing all this, Bilbo ought to have done something at once. Either he should have gone back quietly and warned his friends that there were 3 fair-sized trolls at hand in a nasty mood, quite likely to try roasted dwarf. Or even Pony, for a change, or else he should have done a bit of good, quick burglaring. A really first-class and legendary burglar would at this point have picked the troll's pockets. It is nearly always worthwhile if you can manage it. Pinched the mutton off the spits, purloined the beer, and walked off without their noticing him. Others, more practical but with less professional pride, would perhaps have stuck a dagger into each of them before they observed it. Then the night could have been spent cheerily. Bilbo knew it. He had read a good many things he had never seen or done. He was very much alarmed, as well as disgusted. He wished himself 100 miles away, and yet somehow he could not go straight back to Thorn and Company empty-handed. So he stood and hesitated in the woods. Of the various burglarious proceedings he had heard of, picking the troll's pockets seemed the least difficult. So at last he crept behind a tree just behind William. Bert and Tom went off to the barrel. William was having another drink. Then Bilbo plucked up courage and put his little hand in William's enormous pocket. There was a purse in it, as big as a bag to Bilbo. Ha! Thought he, warming to his new work as he lifted it carefully out. This is a beginning. It was. Trolls' purses are the mischief, and this was no exception. "Hey, who are you?" it squeaked as it left the pocket, and William turned round at once and grabbed Bilbo by the neck before he could duck behind the tree. "Blimey, Bert, look what I've copped," said William. "What is it?" said the others, coming up. "Lummy if I knows. What are you?" "Bilbo Baggins, a Hobbit," said poor Bilbo, shaking all over and wondering how to make owl noises before they throttled him. "A Hobbit?" said they, a bit startled. Trolls are slow in the uptake and mighty suspicious about anything new to them. "What's a Hobbit got to do with my pocket anyways?" said William. "And can you cook 'em?" said Tom. "You can try," said Bert, picking up a skewer. "He wouldn't make more than a mouthful," said William, who had already had a fine supper. "Not when he was skinned and boned. Perhaps there's more like him round about, and we might make a pie," said Bert. "Here, you, are there any more your sort of sneaking in these woods hereabouts?" "You nasty little rabbit," said he, looking at the Hobbit's furry feet, and he picked him up by the toes and shook him. "Yes, lots," said Bilbo, before he remembered not to give his friends away. No one at all, no one," he said immediately afterwards. "What do you mean?" said Bert, holding him right way up, by the hair this time. "What I say," said Bilbo, gasping. "And please don't cook me, kind sirs. I am a good cook myself, and cook better than I cook, if you see what I mean. I'll cook beautifully for you, a perfectly beautiful breakfast for you, if only you won't have me for supper." "Poor little blighter," said William. He had already had as much supper as he could hold. Also, he had had lots of beer. "Poor little blighter, let him go." "Not till he says what he means by lots and none at all," said Bert. "I don't want to have my throat cut in me sleep. Hold his toes in the fire till let him talk." "I won't have it," said William. "I caught him anyway." "You're a fat fool, William," said Bert, "as I've said afore this evening. And you're a lout. And I won't take that from you, Bill Higgins," says Bert, and he put his fist in William's eye. Then there was a gorgeous row. Bilbo had just enough wits left when Bert dropped him on the ground to scramble out of the way of their feet before they were fighting like dogs and calling one another all sorts of perfectly true and applicable names in very loud voices. Soon they were locked in one another's arms and rolling nearly into the fire, kicking and thumping, while Tom whacked at them both with a branch to bring them to their senses. And that, of course, only made them madder than ever. That would have been the time for Bilbo to have left, but his poor little feet had been very squashed in Bert's big paw, and he had no breath in his body, and his head was going round, so there he lay a while, panting, just outside the circle of firelight. Right in the middle of the fight, up came Balin. The dwarves had heard noises from a distance, and after waiting for some time for Bilbo to come back, or to hoot like an owl, they started off one by one to creep towards the light as quietly as they could. No sooner did Tom see Balin come into the light than he gave an awful howl. Trolls simply detest the very sight of dwarves, as long as they're not cooked. Bert and Bill stopped fighting immediately, and "A sack, Tom, quick!" they said, before Balin, who was wondering where all this commotion Bilbo was, knew what was happening. A sack went over his head, and he was down. "There's more to come yet," said Tom, "or I'm mighty mistook. Lots and none at all it is," said he. "No burra hobbits, but lots of these here dwarves. That's about the shape of it." "I reckon you're right," said Bert, "and we'd best get out of the light." And so they did. With sacks in their hands that they used for carrying off mutton or other plunder, they waited in the shadows. And I, school family, guess what? Have a picture of the trolls hiding in the shadows. If you look really close, you can see the trolls back behind the trees. And you can see the head of one of the dwarves as he comes close to the fire. Alrighty. As each dwarf came up and looked at the fire and the spilled jugs and the gnawed mutton in surprise, pop! Went a nasty, smelly sack over his head, and he was down. Soon Dwalin lay by Balin and Feely and Keely together, and Dory and Nori and Ori all in a heap, and Oin and Gloin and Biffer and Bofer and Bomber piled uncomfortably near the fire. "That'll teach 'em," said Tom, for Biffer and Bomber had given a lot of trouble and fought like mad, as dwarves will do when cornered. Thorin came last, and he was not caught unawares. He came expecting mischief, and didn't need to see his friend's legs sticking out of sacks to tell him that things were not all well. He stood outside in the shadows some way off and said, "What's all this trouble? Who has been knocking my people about?" "It's trolls," said Bilbo from behind a tree. They had forgotten all about him. "They're hiding in the bushes with sacks," said he. "Oh, are they?" said Thorin, and he jumped forward to the fire before they could leap on him. He caught up a big branch all on fire at one end, and Bert got that end in his eye before he could step aside. That put him out of the battle for a bit. Bilbo did his best. He caught a hold of Tom's leg as well as he could. It was as thick as a young tree trunk. But he was sent spinning up into the top of some bushes when Tom kicked the sparks up in Thorin's face. Tom got the branch in his teeth for that, and lost one of the front ones. It made him howl, I can tell you. But just at that moment, William came up behind and popped a sack right over Thorin's head and down to his toes. And so the fight ended. A nice pickle they were all in now, all neatly tied up in sacks with 3 angry trolls, and 2 with burns and bashes to remember. sitting by them, arguing whether they should roast them slowly, or mince them fine and boil them, or just sit on them one by one and squash them into jelly. And Bilbo, up in a bush, with his clothes and his skin torn, not daring to move, for fear that they should hear him. And I think, school family, that cliffhanger is the perfect place to stop for today. We'll have to find out if Mr. Bilbo and the dwarves get out from the clutches of the trolls next time. I hope everybody is having a good day, and I hope you all enjoyed the story, and I hope to see you all again next time for Charlotte's Web. Bye.